Hello, Imagine Better community. We're going to talk today about the UT protest. What role should universities have in shaping dialogue on their campuses? When does speech become destruction and sometimes even theft? How far is too far? And is there a sneaky solution hiding in plain sight? We are going to explore the UT protests, the Columbia protests that sparked them, and a couple of solutions that might sound pretty crazy. Make sure to stick around to the end to hear them. Trust me, it's worth it. Let's go.
My name is Mac Latimer, and this is Imagine Better.
Let's dive into the short history of these protests, starting with Columbia University. On April 17th, Congress scheduled the president of Columbia University to come testify about anti-Semitism on college campuses. Unlike some of the other college presidents, she was expected to take a hardline stance against anti-Semitism. In response to a leaked outline of her testimony, Columbia students that were part of a club called Students for Justice in Palestine organized what they called an occupation of campus. Students set up tents at 4 a.m. that day to occupy the South Lawn until, in their words, the university divested from Israel. At 12 p.m. noon, that's 8 hours into the occupation, Columbia University offered amnesty to any of the students as long as they left the lawn before 9 p.m. that day. At 1:20 p.m. the next day, that's more than 24 hours after the original warning, Columbia University authorized the NYPD to make arrests of 108 students that were still present in the encampment. Immediately after those arrests, students, staff, and faculty reoccupied the South Lawn, filling the mainstream media for the next week. This event sparked other similar occupations at other universities with Students for Justice in Palestine clubs. That's when our story reaches the University of Texas. On April 20th, the Palestine Solidarity Committee announced their Popular University for Gaza event, later clarifying they would reclaim our space and occupy the South Lawn in the footsteps of our comrades at Columbia. The UT administration saw the initial announcement by the PSC and requested a meeting. Unfortunately, after the PSC agreed to that meeting, they were a no-show. After not showing up, the UT administration sent a letter to the PSC canceling their event. Then UT provided, in their own words, an abbreviated list of rules related to conduct during protests, including typical consequences as a result of being arrested for criminal trespassing. This notice was provided as a courtesy to all protesters, students, and non-university affiliated persons, to help them understand potential consequences for decisions to violate university rules. It is under these conditions that the events of April 24th unfolded. At 11:20 a.m., 20 minutes prior to the planned walkout, police arrived on campus, and a few minutes later, so did protesters. About an hour later, students started moving towards the South Lawn to occupy it and set up tents. The police, University Police, Austin PD, and DPS told the protesters to disperse or be arrested. Most of the protesters still continued towards the South Lawn, and the police made 9 arrests. At 2 p.m., the protesters started setting up their tents on the South Lawn to create what they called a liberated space. At that point, police started arresting those protesters and pushing the remaining ones off of campus. During this process, the police arrested a total of 55 protesters, including 26 that were not affiliated with UT at all. Since this protest, the PSC attempted to occupy the South Lawn one more time with very similar results. This time, the police arrested 79, 45 of which were not associated with UT. Besides these 2 attempts to occupy the South Lawn, one on the 24th of April and one on the 29th, there have been several organizations that have held pro-Palestinian protests without a single arrest, including the day after the initial one on the 25th and one this past Sunday. So what are the problems here? How does the First Amendment apply, and was it broken? The first important detail is the big difference between Columbia and UT. Columbia is a privately held university, while UT is owned by the state of Texas. That gives Columbia University a lot more leeway in regulating speech. Just like HEB can restrict you from walking around their store waving a Vote Biden sign, Columbia University can easily restrict speech on its campus. But since Texas owns UT, the First Amendment applies. The Supreme Court ruled in Healy v. James that public universities have to protect free speech. However, they can regulate speech based on time, place, and manner, as long as those regulations are reasonable and content neutral. In other words, student speech couldn't infringe reasonable campus rules, interrupt classes, or substantially interfere with the opportunity of other students to obtain an education. So this is open and shut, right? The police didn't arrest students until they interfered with those reasonable campus rules, and those protesters clearly meant to substantially interfere with the education of their fellow students. So there was no content discrimination, just the enforcement of campus rules. Right? Except I left out a whole part of the story. On March 27th, Greg Abbott issued an executive order telling campuses to change their speech policies to address the sharp rise in anti-Semitic speech and acts on university campuses and establish appropriate punishments, including expulsion. This is viewpoint discrimination, which leads to motive for the governor's actions. That and several social media posts are all it takes to muddy the waters of an otherwise pretty clear situation. So how do we fix this? What's the solution? The first solution is simple. Greg Abbott needs to rescind his last executive order and issue a new one that universities should enforce their speech policy in a content-neutral manner. The following solution allows the governor to address anti-Semitism on college campuses, but it's a little radical. What he could do is he could make UT and other Texas universities private. He could do this by putting each university in its own nonprofit and even give each of them its own endowment so they could still subsidize the tuition of lower income students. The icing on the cake is he, along with the state legislature, could be the one to write the rules on how those nonprofits function and choose their boards. Texas could simultaneously free its universities from the restrictions of the First Amendment and also create the largest grouping of private conservative colleges in the world. So what do you think? Which solution do you prefer? Is the second solution going too far? Let me know in the comments. If you made it to the end, thank you so much, and here is how you can help us. The first is you can click the like button and the subscription and notification buttons if you're on YouTube. Then you can go into the show notes of this video and follow Imagine Better Media on all of the platforms that you normally use. After that, please share us with as many people as possible, both online and in person. Then finally, you can go on our site, imaginebettermedia.com, and sign up for one of our subscriptions. Thank you so much to our VIP subscribers who help make these videos possible. Let's imagine better and make it happen. And while you're here, you can click here to check out our other stories.